Hi and welcome back to my channel. I hope you've all recovered from last week's case, which was rather frustrating to say the least. Today we are going to cover the case of two women who have been known as the lethal lovers. But before we get started, I just want to remind you what the trigger warnings for today's case are. Today's trigger warnings are abuse and murder of elderly people, self-harm, physical, emotional and sexual abuse, as well as animal abuse and murder. So without any further ado, let's get on to the video. Catherine May Wood was born on the 7th of March in 1962 to her parents John and Donna in Soap Lake in Washington. Her father John was in the military, whilst her mother Donna was a stay-at-home wife. Catherine did have a younger sister who I couldn't find out that much about. The family would move from Washington to Massachusetts, and also around the time Catherine's father John would be sent to fight in the Vietnam War. John survived the war, but once he came back, he was a totally different person. The war had drastic effects on him, and besides him having severe PTSD, John was very abusive, not only towards his wife but also to his children. Catherine would also say that her father would start to drink rather heavily, and she didn't really want to be around him all that much. She started to isolate herself pretty much every chance that she got, and the relationship with her mother would also start to crumble because Catherine was very hurt by the fact that her mom just wouldn't stand up for her and her sister. So the only person Catherine would talk to was her younger sister. And sad as it is, it was the abuse at home that drew them closer together. And the situation at home would escalate even further once Catherine entered her teenage years. Her father John would just pick her apart, whether it was her body, her height, weight, looks. He found every small reason to just make fun of her. Her father just completely destroyed her self-image. And at the age of 14, Catherine found herself her first boyfriend called David. Now, she did tell her parents that she had a boyfriend and that she was in a relationship, but her parents never actually met David. And I can't really say that I blame Catherine for not wanting to introduce David to her family. But Catherine would go over to David's house whenever she could. 1.5 years into the relationship, Catherine's mom one day came over to David's home to, just pick up her daughter. So David's mom opens the door and Donna introduces herself to her and just tells her that she came by to pick up Catherine. This woman just looked at Donna and said that she didn't have a son called David. In fact, this woman didn't have a son at all. However, she did have a daughter called Debbie. And yes, Catherine was at their house, but she was hanging out with her daughter. Upon hearing this news, Donna just exploded. She told Catherine that she was strictly forbidden to ever see Debbie again. And Catherine, just being a teenager and also being in a relationship for now almost 2 years, just begged her parents to just listen to her for a moment. But they just threatened Catherine that if she didn't break up with David, that they would put their own daughter in a psychiatric hospital. Catherine goes on to tell John and Donna that she was dating David and that they even had sex and that David did indeed have a penis. So she basically tries to tell her parents, like, how do you guys think I feel? Like, I have been in a relationship with this person for almost 2 years now. And she actually managed to convince her parents. They eventually believed the story that Catherine just had no idea that this was indeed a girl. But Catherine's younger sister would later come out and say that she never really believed the story. It would also come out that Catherine was a pathological liar. other. Now, most people believe that Catherine was very well aware that she was indeed dating a girl, but kind of didn't want to admit it or was scared to admit it. She probably knew that her parents wouldn't be supportive of her dating a girl, so that's why she lied, and this pattern would actually follow her into her adulthood. The relationship with Debbie wouldn't last long, and once Catherine turned 17 years old, she got into a relationship with a 20-year-old man called Ken. And Ken was the complete opposite of Catherine. She was rebellious, outgoing, she kind of liked getting into trouble, but Ken was very calm, sensible. He had his life under control, and on top of that, he seemed to really adore Catherine. Now, quickly into the relationship, Catherine actually fell pregnant, and the couple decided that they want to keep the baby, and also decided to get married so that their baby wouldn't be a baby out of wedlock. So not even 1 year of them dating, Catherine and Ken were living together, and Catherine went to a lot of classes regarding pregnancies, teen pregnancies especially, and she would also be around her mother trying to learn a thing or two about, becoming a mother that young. But Donna at this point was a very, very bitter and very jealous woman. She couldn't quite cope with the fact that her daughter was now all grown up, which never made any sense to me. Like, how can you possibly be jealous of your own child? Another fact of why Donna may have been resentful towards her daughter was that Catherine managed to escape this abusive home, which Donna was still stuck at. Catherine's mental health had gotten worse and worse during her pregnancy. I mean, it wasn't the best to begin with. The breakup with Debbie, David, that her own parents were going to throw her into a psychiatric hospital. She was also bullied at school, the abuse at home additionally, and Catherine just didn't really have any friends at all. And on top of that, Catherine and Ken soon realized that getting married maybe wasn't the best idea. Maybe they weren't meant for each other like they thought initially to be. But Catherine was pregnant and they were planning a wedding after all. So in their minds, it was a little bit too late to back out now. Catherine's family also started to bully Ken, and with the bullying and how her parents were acting in general, Ken's mental health just started to go downhill just like Catherine's. Ken just couldn't manage to be there for Catherine anymore, so Catherine in the process just turned to food as a comfort. In fact, she gained over 100 pounds just in 9 months, and that can be actually quite dangerous, not only for yourself but also the child. Her blood pressure began to rise uncontrollably, and Catherine actually gave birth prematurely. Thankfully, mother and child were healthy, and Catherine named her daughter Jacqueline. But even after birth, Catherine still couldn't stop to use food as a coping mechanism. She gained over 450 pounds and started to isolate herself even more and more over time. Catherine didn't want to go anywhere, she didn't want to see anyone, she just wanted to be at home and just be left alone. And due to the fact that she gained that much weight in such a short period of time, she couldn't really do much. She wasn't able to properly care for her daughter, like change her diapers or clothes, feed her or cuddle with her. All of that wasn't possible because she was struggling with moving around the house. So with her not really being able to do that much, it was left to Ken to take care of Jacqueline. And because the fact that Catherine wasn't able to take care of her daughter, she also struggled really to bond with Jacqueline. That would lead to Catherine becoming even more depressed over time. And it was those factors that over time turned Catherine into a very angry, moody and also aggressive woman. And this affected Ken as well. He had parents-in-law who couldn't really stand him, who bullied him. He was the sole provider for his family. Ken took care of his daughter and his wife now, And when he got home, not only was he continuing to work, but his wife was now also being mean to him. But Ken was just such a sweet and caring guy. He tried everything that he could come up with to help Catherine. He even suggested to her to go to some classes and kind of get a qualification for her to be able to get a job, to at least have a reason to leave the house again. And Catherine did just that. She managed to get a job as a nurse aide at Alpine Manor. So she starts to work at Alpine Manor now, and she also asked if she could work the night shifts there. Night shifts in general were a little bit more easier to work. She would get patients ready for bed, put them into bed, be there just in case somebody would need anything during the night. And that's also when Catherine would meet a woman called Gwen Graham. Gwen Gail Graham was born on the 6th of August in 1963 in Santa Monica, California. Her father is described as a very emotionless man that was under the impression not to be effective with children because, according to him, that would make them weak. The first 10 years of Gwen's life, she spent majority of it just moving around, and I don't know why the family moved that much. But because of the fact, Gwen didn't really have the opportunity to make any friends. Eventually the family found themselves a nice farm in Texas to settle down. But the trouble unfortunately didn't stop for Gwen there, because her father was also a very, very abusive man. He would abuse his daughter physically, emotionally, and unfortunately even sexually. When Gwen was only 12 years old, she started to self-harm because she just couldn't cope any other way. Her father was a disgusting and horrible human being. He would make Gwen watch as he killed the animals that they had on the farm, kind of as a sick way to toughen her up and to make things even worse, because apparently they aren't bad enough. Gwen had a dog since her childhood days, and to her this dog was basically her only friend. But unfortunately the dog was very old and started to become more and more sick over time. Gwen's own father forced Gwen's brother to shoot the dog and made Gwen watch the whole thing. Poor Gwen, shocked and devastated over the loss of her only friend, you could almost say a family member, had to endure getting laughed at and being ridiculed for the way that she was showing her grief. And I'm not talking about, maybe laughing for 1-2 minutes, which is bad enough, because why would you laugh at your own daughter for grieving the loss of her beloved dog? Like, what kind of sick human are you? They would go even further. This grown-ass man, I might add, would stand outside Gwen's bedroom when she was getting ready to get to bed. And he would knock on her window and kind of cry and howl out the name of her dog. And again, I'm just thinking, what kind of effed up things did this man go through in his life to have so little dignity to do that to your own child? And poor Gwen just couldn't cope with the loss of her dog. So just a few days after the family buried the dog, Gwen was so overwhelmed with everything that she actually dug up the corpses of her dog, and she would actually keep the dog's head and keep some of his teeth for the rest of her life. Gwen's dream job was to become a veterinarian for animals, but for some reasons she had to drop out of high school. So Gwen did get some additional classes which got her the opportunity to get herself into a nursing training program, but soon she would drop out of that as well. When Gwen was about 20 years old, she would get into her first serious relationship with a woman called Fran. Fran was 28 years old at the time, and the two women actually moved in together, but Fran soon realized that Texas just wasn't cutting it for her. So she decides that she would move back to Michigan where her family lives. She did ask Gwen if she wanted to come along with her, and Gwen at first is very hesitant to leave her family behind, but knowing in her heart heart that her family would never change, she agreed, so the two of them moved to Grand Rapids in Michigan. And that's when Fran actually found a job opportunity close to where she lived in a nursery home called Alpine Manor. And once Gwen got to Michigan, she kind of started to regret her decision a little. For her, everything kind of seemed off. The apartment wasn't really the nicest. She felt as if Fran was a completely different person now. Gwen started to work on the 21st of June in 1986, and Gwen was immediately welcomed there. The other staff members were welcoming her with open arms. She was funny, kind, and on top of that, she was lesbian. And most of the other women who worked there were lesbians as well. And aside from, maybe flirting with someone you fancy, Grand Rapids wasn't all that fond of gays and lesbians in 1980. So it was nice of people you could actually bond with. And at Alpine Manor is where Gwen and Catherine would meet. The women got along pretty fast, but they were both in a committed relationship. Well, Catherine's was already coming to an end because she actually had an affair going on at the nursery home with a woman called Dawn. Now, Catherine didn't leave Ken, but she did start, well, it wasn't technically a relationship, I don't know if it was a relationship. Let's just call it flirtationship. Is that a word? Well, they were flirting, but I don't know how far it went. Let's just call it flirtationship. And it said that the two women had a nice time with each other, being funny and playful. But once Catherine and Gwen met at one of their night shifts, the two women would become inseparable. They would spend the night shifts together, their breaks together. They would even start spending time outside of the work and even on the weekends. And this all happened very, very quickly, by the way. And after maybe just 3 weeks of them flirting, I guess they decided to move in with each other. And once they moved in, they both would start to tell people that they were just roommates. Just two co-workers living together to share the rent. So once both settled in, they break up with their initial others. The breakup between Gwen and Fran wasn't really surprising, considering things weren't quite like they used to. So yeah, Gwen broke up with Fran, and Catherine, on the other hand, had a little bit of a harder breakup to do. Because she was married, she had to officially divorce Ken, and he actually received, I believe, full custody of Jacqueline. So now, with her husband gone, her daughter gone, Catherine now also needed to end things with Dawn. And so Catherine and Gwen officially start a relationship. Well, I'm pretty sure they were already in a relationship the moment that they met, but now it was kind of an official thing, if you know what I mean. They continued to be inseparable, going out together, working, just everything together. And this constantly sticking around together wasn't healthy at all. The couple would encourage each other to drink to the point of having no recollection. They would start to fight one another, screaming, yelling, manipulating, even threatening each other. They were so out of control that Catherine and Gwen would even start to self-harm in front of each other. But they were in such a roller coaster, I think, that they didn't even quite notice it, just how toxic the relationship had become. After all, they did share the same trauma and were able to talk about it. But over time, it gradually became worse and worse because the two would now start to play pranks at Alpine Manor. And not just like some small prank or even a funny one. They would hide their patients, and the other staff members would spend hours looking for them. And it's not like those patients were kind of involved or even realized what went on and that they were kind of involved in a prank. A lot of them were old, maybe even had dementia. So I can't imagine that they were really that in on this prank. And it's not even the fact that those people were in another room, but the patients would spend hours in that room without food, without water, and without their needed medications. When friends and family showed interests in their work and they would ask Catherine and Gwen about their job and what exactly it was that they were doing at Alpine Manor, their answer would be just so creepy. Catherine's answer at one point was nothing that could get us into trouble. Why exactly is that her answer when asked what she was doing? This alone would start to raise alarm bells in my head. In 1988, their turbulent relationship would come crashing down in the couple because Catherine caught Gwen cheating on her with another co-worker. So not only is Gwen cheating on Catherine, but she's doing it at their workplace. This realization just broke Catherine completely. She left everything that she had for this woman and she dedicated every minute to this woman for over a year now. I mean, they did everything together. Living, working, partying, and Catherine didn't have anyone really to vent to besides Candace. They did still have contact with each other, mostly because of the sake of their daughter, I believe. And Ken, despite the fact that she left him for another woman, was still there for her. And it wasn't like they were trying to get back together or anything. Catherine just really needed someone to talk to. And Ken was just such a kind-hearted person that he was still there for her. So they sat down and Catherine confessed everything to Ken. Catherine tells Ken everything from the start of the relationship, that as soon as they met they already started a relationship and that they were both into BDSM. At first everything was fine, but soon Gwen started to get more and more aggressive. And Catherine, after some time, started to get really scared. Catherine also said that Gwen once tied her to the bed, grabbed a gun and proceeded to insert it into her and threatened to shoot her. She says that she just went along with Gwen's wishes because she didn't want to make her even angrier. After all, they did bond pretty much and pretty deep over their shared trauma. Catherine and Gwen did kind of have the same childhood, kind of the same parents, and as they talked more and more about their experience and their anger, they both soon realized that they wanted revenge for everything that went wrong in their life. But they quickly drifted off topic because soon it wasn't about their abusers and the people that did them wrong. They started to talk about murder in general. Catherine at first didn't think anything of it. She just thought that Gwen was getting interested in murder because she was talking and fantasizing about it, kind of helped her with her anger. So Catherine continues to confess that there was one patient called Margaret Chamber who was 60 years old at the time. Margaret was suffering from Alzheimer's for 12 years and it had increasingly gotten worse over time. She needed 24/7 care, but before her condition had gotten worse over time, she was actually described as a very kind, bubbly, an extroverted woman. She was living at Alpine Manor from 1975, I believe, and she was quite popular, if you will. Staff members as well as other patients just really adored her. In fact, Margaret was still married to her first husband who came to visit her every day. And he also came to visit her on the 18th of January in 1987. And this is also where the tragic events of today's case take place. Her husband came to visit her on that day and it was just as always. They talked, laughed, and as he left he gave her a goodbye kiss, but this would actually be the last time that he would see his wife. The day went on as normal, and once the nighttime had set in, the staff, just like any other night, prepared the food and the medications. And once everyone was in their bed, Gwen took Catherine to Margaret's bedroom and told her to stay outside and watch that no one was coming. Catherine went into the room and placed a damp cloth which she had on her over sleeping Margaret's face. The elderly woman woke up confused and scared and tried to fight Gwen off, but unfortunately Gwen was just too strong for her, and so Margaret Chamber would end up losing her life. Finally, Gwen had made her sick and twisted fantasies come true. And I believe that she had chosen Margaret because she knew that this would be an easy killing for her. After Gwen was finished, she and Catherine went back onto their night shift. The body of Margaret was soon discovered while the nurses were doing their routine checkup. Everyone was just shocked and devastated because apart from her Alzheimer, she was in a pretty good condition. Her death certificate was signed, but there was no autopsy done since everyone kind of believed that her Alzheimer had something to do with her passing. Catherine and Gwen actually took 2 days off and they just got wasted. They were getting drunk, they were doing drugs, having sex, and during those 2 days they didn't leave their apartment once. But it would just continue on to escalate. Gwen was on so much alcohol and drugs that she had the need to relive the killing. So, whilst having sex with Catherine, she managed to get a damp cloth and put it over Catherine's face just like she did with Margaret's. And this was actually just the beginning of the killing spree. The two wanted to make a game out of it. With every murder that they committed, they wanted to spell out the word murder. So, for example, their first victim was Margaret. So they had M for murder. But they soon realized that it would be harder and more complicated that way. So they just decided to stick to just murdering random patients in the Alpine Manor. And the couple actually kept the exact same pattern up with every killing that they committed from now on. The next victim was a woman called Myrtle Lewis, who was said to have her 96th birthday just a few days after her murder. Gwen had actually forgotten to take the washcloth with her after she was finished. And it was even found afterwards. But again, Myrtle was almost 96 years old, so no one really thought anything of it. And again, Catherine and Gwen escalated in their sex, drugs and partying nights. They actually thought that this killing somehow would connect them even more with each other. Like, no one had this kind of bond besides the two of them. They thought by committing those murders that this is now ride or die, that their relationship from now on would be unbreakable. The next victim was a woman called May Mason, who was 79 years old at the time. And again, the same pattern. Catherine would stay outside while Catherine would put a damn washcloth over the victim's face. And mind you, those 3 murders happened over the course of 3 weeks. But again, there just was no suspicion. Because this mansion was full of elderly people and also sick people. And whilst on this murder spree, Catherine and Gwen would develop kind of a ritual where they would say, "I love you forever," and then add one date that stood for the killing. The fourth victim was a woman called Belle Burkhardt, and she was 74 years old. Now, prior to her death, Belle actually had some kind of problems regarding her medication. She was suffering from seizures and also dementia. Her body was found on the 26th of February in 1987. And again, it was just ruled as natural cause. And I get that this is a nursing home, but it is still kind of suspicious that so many people would end up dead just within a few weeks. And now we're approaching the 5th and final victim, a woman called Edith Cook. She was 97 years old at the time, and she was living in Alpine Manor for quite some time now. Despite her health not being the best, and with her being 97 years old, she was still always smiling and just full of joy. Gwen and Catherine proceeded the murder on Edith Cook, just like they previously did, but this time Catherine herself proclaimed that she had found the body of Edith Cook. But after Edith, they just suddenly stopped with the killing spree. And I personally believe it's because it was that time that Gwen had actually started an affair with one of her co-workers. This woman was called Robin, and she was very well aware of the fact that Gwen was in a committed relationship. Even after Catherine found out about the infidelity, she didn't leave Gwen, but Gwen also didn't leave Robin. So now the whole thing has kind of turned into a triangle relationship, which I think was only fine for Gwen, since Catherine and Robin didn't really want to do anything with each other. So after Ken heard the whole story, he didn't believe Catherine a single word, knowing just how manipulative she can get, especially when she tries to hurt other people. But Ken just couldn't look past one thing. If this was kind of a sick revenge plan to get back at her cheating girlfriend, why on earth would Catherine say to him that she was involved in all of this? So this got Ken thinking, but he still didn't tell anyone about the confession of his ex-wife because he didn't quite know what to believe, and because he was in such a shock that maybe he didn't want to believe that the mother of his child would go around and take the life of elderly, sick people. Catherine and Ken actually would meet up a few times after the first confession, and Ken would ask Catherine more and more questions to which she had all the answers. So Ken at one point blankly just asked her why, and that's when he knew she wasn't making this up, because Catherine just replied very cold and very emotionless, because it's fun. Catherine also goes on to tell Ken that if he even thinks about going to the police, that she would take her own life. Now, we'll skip time just a little to July in 1987, when everything kind of started to fall apart. Catherine and Gwen got into a huge argument that in hindsight would be the last. Catherine had threatened Robin, Gwen's other girlfriend, and their argument just kept on escalating until Gwen packed up her things and walked out on a devastated Catherine. And she didn't just leave Catherine, it wasn't just a breakup. Gwen left everything behind her. Catherine, Robin, and even her job at Alpine Manor. Gwen actually decided to move back to Texas. So with Gwen now officially gone, Catherine tries to keep up with her life and tries to get comfortable with a life without Gwen. But that would also soon change. And in the fall of 1988, police all of a sudden turned up at Alpine Manor. Ken kept Catherine's secret for over a year at this point, but because of his conscience kept nagging at him, he finally decided to go to the police and confess everything. Catherine Wood was arrested on spot for the suspicious of 5 murders. Once the police took a closer look on the death records, they soon realized that Catherine and Gwen were always on shift when the 5 women were found dead. As soon as Catherine was at the police station, she actually confessed right away. She told the police the same story that she told her ex-husband, that Gwen was the one carrying out the murders and that she was kind of pressured in to wait by the door so there wouldn't be any witnesses. So upon hearing Catherine's confession and Catherine naming all 5 of the victims, the police in Michigan contacted the police in Texas to arrest Gwen Graham straight away. Once Gwen was brought to the police station, she also confessed straight away, but her confession, the roles were reversed. She tells the police officers that it was indeed Catherine who carried out the murders, while she was standing at the door and watching if people were coming. Gwen goes on to tell the officer that they were also in a very heavy and violent BDSM relationship that Gwen actually didn't want to be in, but she did it anyway to make Catherine happy. So for the police officers it was unclear of who committed the murders, but they were sure that both women were somehow involved in it. So now they just had to confirm that those deaths were actual murders and not natural deaths. But this turned out to be harder than first expected. 3 victims were cremated, and one of the victims was cremated one day after her murder. 2 victims were buried, but that was already over a year ago. So the 2 bodies had to be dug up from their grave so an autopsy could be done. There were no visible signs of violence, but the autopsy showed that the cause of death was due to suffocation. But before they could be brought to a judge, police needed to dig a little deeper into their past. And whilst doing their research and talking to friends and family, the officers soon came to the conclusion that Catherine was more likely to tell the truth than Gwen. But they still weren't 100% convinced. Nonetheless, they decided to offer Catherine Wood a plea deal if she would give up more evidence and information about Gwen Graham. So during the trial, Catherine came forward with even more gruesome details. For example, she threatened Gwen that if she didn't do an act how Catherine wanted her to, that she would go to the police. And once it was Gwen's turn, she admitted that she was abusive to Catherine. But she also said that the relationship was abusive as a whole, and that they did everything together, including murder. She had friends also came forward and confirmed Gwen's testimony that their relationship was indeed shared abusive. But co-workers would also say that once Gwen moved back to Texas, Catherine's anger didn't let down. She was not only abusive to her co-workers, but also to the patients that were living there. On the 3rd of November in 1989, Gwen Graham was convicted of all 5 murders, and she was sentenced to 5 life sentences. Catherine Wood was found guilty of 1 count of second-degree murder and 1 count of conspiracy to commit murder. And due to her plea deal, Catherine Wood was sentenced to 40 years in prison. In 2005, Catherine was eligible for parole, but was denied. And in 2020, Catherine Wood has been released from prison. So yeah, Catherine is now outside, while Gwen is still locked inside prison, and she will probably never see the outside world again. And the frustrating part is we still don't know what happened. We know bits and pieces, but I believe that the truth will only be known between Catherine and Gwen. So yeah, that was it for today's case. I hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget there will be 2 videos coming up next week. So definitely stay tuned for that. So yeah, please let me know your thoughts on this case. Although it is somewhat solved, it's definitely not even close to the whole truth. If you don't want to miss any new video of mine, please don't forget to subscribe and leave me a like and a comment on which case you would like to see me cover next. I hope I see you all in my next video. Bye!